How you doing, Bob?
Rich, I'm doing well. I seem to recall, and although it wouldn't have been the record, Yogi Berra got the pink slip less than 20 games into a season, late 80s, early 90s, whenever it was, when George Steinbrenner was on a firing spree. Yogi got the boot very, very early on, sometime in the 80s.
I have that number in 1985, 16 games into the 1985 season. And that was particular, obviously, I mean, to do that to Yogi as well. I mean,
and what it led to, in Yogi, you have one of the nicest human beings who ever lived, but he vowed never to return to Yankee Stadium after that. And Susan Waldman, who's one of the Yankees announcers, along with John Sterling on the radio side, actually brokered a détente.
That's right.
And Steinbrenner went to the Berra Museum in New Jersey to personally apologize many, many years later. And then Yogi came back to Yankee Stadium and the number 8 and all the rest, and it ended the way it should have ended with Yogi back in the Yankee fold. But it so ticked him off, and it took a lot to tick Yogi Berra off. Now, as far as Brian Price is concerned, today's news, I don't know Brian Price well. We haven't covered that many Reds games on the MLB network in person because the Reds haven't been that good. But that's the answer to it. You look at the Reds roster in a perpetual rebuilding situation, he didn't have that much to work with. So I think he's a victim just of, you've got Joey Votto and not much else.
That's it.
He's a victim of the material he had to work with, and I hope it doesn't hamper him in trying to land another big league job somewhere down the road.
Now, I know this may sound, pie in the sky, but wasn't the new collective bargaining agreement and how this is all working out in baseball supposed to do away with so-called small market teams just tapping out and just slicing payroll and trying to make do? We see what's going on with the Marlins, even though Derek Jeter's come out and said that Mattingly still needs to find ways to win games. But weren't we supposed to do away with the small market teams having zero shot from April on, Bob?
Yeah, having zero shot. I don't think anyone ever believed that they could get it to complete equity, but at least getting to a place where teams had a shot, and Kansas City went to back-to-back World Series. And then following that, you had a model that a lot of teams are trying to emulate. And I don't know whether this is Cincinnati's plan or not, but it's clearly the plan of some teams. Look at the last two teams to win the World Series, the Cubs and the Astros, each with relative new school thinking in their front office, new school thinking that now is becoming standard thinking. And the idea of these teams was, why do we want to go 75 and whatever adds up from 75 to 162 perpetually when we can just tear this down, get the draft choices, get the prospects that we get in return for letting players go, and if we play our cards right, we'll build a championship team. That's exactly what happened with Theo Epstein and company in Chicago. It's exactly what happened under Jeff Lunau's direction in Houston. And a lot of teams, rather than just be reasonably competitive and somewhere around 500, are following that model.
Bob Costas, MLB Network, NBC Sports, here on the Rich Eisen Show. What did you think of Anthony Rizzo saying that the schedule should be shortened, Bob?
Well, I happen to agree with him. I think a 154-game schedule would have historic continuity. That's what it was until 1961 in the American League and 62 in the National League. It would provide some breathing room. You have to remember, even when they were playing 162 games, virtually every team played a Sunday doubleheader.
Mm-hmm.
They played every week. They played a Sunday doubleheader. They played doubleheaders on the 4th of July, on Memorial Day, and on Labor Day. That took care of some of that bunching up of the schedule. Now you have more teams in far-flung places. You have teams in Tampa and in Seattle. You got difficulties with travel. They started the season this year on March 29th. A record number of first-month rainouts and other games that were played under Arctic conditions that are just not conducive to baseball. If you had 154 games, it would provide more breathing room. The obvious counter-argument is that you give up some revenue. But I think there's an answer to that. What you'd be giving up is, for each team, they'd be giving up 4 home dates. Not all 8 of those games are home games, obviously. They're 4 home games for each team. Now, you are giving up some revenue because almost all games are on regional sports networks now, so that's all 8 of those games would be regionally televised. So there is some revenue that you would give up, granted. But the quality of play would be better. You might have fewer players on the disabled list. And the way you make up some of that revenue is you'd have enough breathing room to intelligently expand the playoffs without having it spill into November. Everybody likes the one game and out of the wild card situation, but it's really not fair. If the second wild card, the lesser of all the qualifiers, has its ace rested and ready, if you're already locked into the second wild card and you have one really good pitcher, you can win that game, and down the drain goes the whole season of a team that might have finished one game back, won 100 games, and finished one game back in its division and took the first wild card. What makes more sense to me is to play 2 out of 3, all 3 if necessary, on the home field of the better of the 2 wild cards. Then what you've done is you've created important distinctions between finishing first and being a wild card, and between being the first wild card and the second wild card. And then, why should the first round of the playoffs, you didn't know you were going to get Treatise here, but on the other hand, you booked me, Rich, so it's always a possibility.
You go, Bob Costas. Go down this wormhole. You keep going. Go for it.
Okay.
Yes.
Why, logically, out of 3 rounds, once you get past the wild card, should the first round, the division series, be 5 games, but the LCS and the World Series are each 7, when the first round is the one which, by definition, is going to include the wild card and the third best division winner? Now, obviously, in a best of 7, the best team doesn't always win. But when you play best of 5, you're increasing the possibility that the lesser team will win, especially because you've got off days between the second and third game and the fourth and the fifth, if there is one, which allows you to manipulate your pitching if you have 2 good starters in a way that could never happen during the regular season, which further advantages a team that might not be as good overall,
right,
but which has a short-term shot. So let's suppose you expanded the division series to 7 games, but you made the wild card best 2 out of 3. Whoever survives the wild card has to have used, by definition, 2 starting pitchers, and the way the modern game is played, they've got to go into their bullpen a little bit. They will then travel to the home park of the team that had the best record in the league. That team is rested and ready, not rested long enough to get rusty, but rested and ready enough, even if they had to go to the last weekend to clinch their spot, to get their pitching in order, further advantaging them appropriately over the wild card team.
So,
and then in that best of 7,
right,
while the second and third best division winners play a classic best of 7, which is 2-3-2. In this best of 7, between the wild card survivor and the best team, you go 2-2-3. So 5, 6, and 7, if necessary, are also on the home field of the team with the best record in the league. So you've expanded the playoffs, yes, by adding a second wild card, which is better than having just one wild card. Because when they had just one, there was almost no reason to really care about who finished first, as long as you grabbed the wild card. And so many wild card teams went all the way to win the World Series that it proved that. It took a lot of the drama and the meaning out of 162 games. By having 2 wild cards, they've at least put a premium on finishing first. Now you're going to put a further premium on it, and you're going to further create an appropriate hill to climb for not only the first wild card, but a larger hill to climb for the second wild card. Not impossible, but appropriately difficult. Now, by having at least 2 and maybe 3 wild card games, that's additional network or cable revenue, which is shared by all teams. By having the division series be best of 7, that's additional television money, which is shared by all teams. Would it make up the entire amount that you might lose by giving up 8 regular season games? I'm not sure, but I think it would come reasonably close, and it would actually enhance the postseason while making the regular season less grueling for players, fewer injuries, higher quality of play.
So can you start from the 154 game thing, because I just missed that?
Yeah, you know, by the way, I'm done now. I have to take oxygen.
So you haven't given this any thought at all, then, Bob. In other words, you haven't thought this through. I don't think you've thought this through, Bob.
This is what happens when you cut back on your schedule and you have time just to ruminate. I had actually vowed never to come on your show again unless and until J.B. Smoove joined me. But I violated that vow several times since we got together at the Super Bowl.
That's right. Many, many years ago. Hey, look, we hooked you up with Brooklyn Decker the last time to talk about our dog. So we do
take care of me.
We've had good times on that front. Well, look, that sounds like have you posited that to any powers that be in New York City, Bob?
I think I ran it by Rob Manfred on one occasion. And he politely nodded and smiled. By the way, there are people who believe, no, regardless of whether it's inequitable in some respects, they love one game and out. And I have to concede the fact that some of these wild card games have been incredible games. I mean, Oakland and Kansas City a few years ago, and Colorado and Arizona last year. They've been incredible single games. I grant you that.
Before I let you go, Bob, you were with Hank Azaria.
You're giving me the bum's rush pretty quickly.
No, not at all.
For fear that my next answer will be one of the volumes of the old Encyclopedia Britannica.
Not at all.
Which, by the way, no one has anymore because you can Google everything.
That's true.
But back in the day, it was actually a sign of prestige for striving middle-class families to have Collier's Encyclopedia or the Encyclopedia Britannica on the bookshelf because it showed that they cared about their children's future and their education.
I had a World Book. I had the Encyclopedia in my house too. Hey, the Brockmire conversation, the Brockmire-Musburger feud that's going on right now, Bob. How would you try to broker the peace here between those two guys, Bob?
I think. Obama once famously had a beer summit between the policeman and Henry Louis Gates. I think that Musburger and Brockmire, and it can't be Hank Azaria, it has to be Brockmire.
Correct.
They need to meet not only over a six-pack, but a gigantic bowl of Tostitos and hash this thing out. Because it's gotten to the point where fisticuffs may ensue. It's gotten truly nasty. I see that Brent responded.
He did
on Twitter today, and concluded by referring to Brockmire as a slime ball, and there was a veiled threat that one of his Vegas enforcers might meet Brockmire in the parking lot, perhaps outside the Sands, where I'm not sure who's appearing.
It's probably Wayne Newton.
Yeah,
or
he's still around.
Some form of him.
Back in the day, it could have been Shecky Green and Lola Falana, which I would have preferred just for the sense of absurdity that would surround the situation.
All right, but I think that might be happening. We have to get them together, Bob. You're right.
Brockmire, as you know, is one of the funniest shows on television.
Agreed.
And they screened the first episode of the second season, which premieres on April 25th last night in New York. And there were guffaws. I mean, people laugh out loud. These aren't chuckles. These are laugh out loud lines. It's a brilliantly written show, and Hank Azaria is just fantastic as Brockmire. And as he told you, I saw his appearance with you, there are things that Brockmire can say, once you've established who this character is, that not only can't Hank Azaria say, you or I wouldn't even say in private conversation.
No, we would not.
But Brockmire not only gets away with it, he thrives with it.
Bob, you're the best. We'll chat again soon. Please let me know when you're out here in L.A., okay? We'll hang
out.
All right,
Rich. Take care, man.
That's Bob Costas.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.